a year's worth of salary that you have to put on someone being champion this year, guys. You have to put it on. Who are you going to put it on right now?
If you're betting the farm, I would still go George.
Right now, today, I'd be with Kimi. Yep.
Wow.
In the same way that it's a big weekend for George Russell, this feels equally big for Lewis Hamilton.
You'll start to see a picture of Lewis can't be strong in Canada that you're thinking, okay, the season's just drifting away from him again. So it's a big one.
From Miami to Montreal, it's race week once again. Welcome everyone to F1 Nation's preview of the Canadian Grand Prix. I'm Tom Clarkson and my regular teammates Jolyon Palmer and James Hinchcliffe are with me. Now guys, talking of teammates, we had a lot of comments from people who really enjoyed us completely losing it on last week's show.
Johnny Dumfries and Satoru Nakajima, do you know what their average qualifying deficit was to Senna? I've had a lot of fun doing this, right? Yeah. It's somewhere between 3 and 4 seconds per lap. What does that debrief look like? Well, Satoru, how can you go quicker? What do you need from the car? We're just looking for like a second a corner, please, mate. I mean, so Senna's arriving to McLaren.
You're saying he was an unknown quantity when he came to McLaren?
Yeah,
because,
and he's never really had a team.
Poor Satoru.
It's a very good point. Well made, JP.
Oh, that was good.
You got me.
What were the debriefs like? What do you need from the car? Oh, God.
Have you stopped laughing? Have we got everything under control today?
I've got over it. I have got over it just about. Hinch, maybe not. I've not laughed like that trying to do a broadcast in my life. I don't know what it was. Something in the air last week.
Yeah. 7 minutes of corpsing. I'm not sure exactly what the elapsed time was that stayed in the show, but I can tell you, everybody listening at home, it was quite a scene. Quite a scene. What a great episode to not have video.
I couldn't even get my deep dive on Johnny Dumfries and Satoru Nakajima properly in. I was laughing too much. So it needs another special, I think, TC.
Well, we were discussing teammate rivalries, and if you want to hear us cracking up for that full... well, not quite 7 minutes actually in the final edit, do go back to last week's episode of F1 Nation. But this week, we're here to talk all things Montreal. 70 laps of the circuit Gilles Villeneuve awaits Formula One this weekend. Guys, talk us through the track. What challenges does it present the drivers in these new 2026 cars?
It's a tricky circuit. It's really characterful, I think. I would say it's pretty much all chicanes. So every corner, apart from the hairpin, the really slow speed towards the end of the lap, is a sequence of corners. It's even turn 1, you go left, and immediately you carry in towards turn 2. It's all about curb riding. It's all about getting the right balance, having the right attitude of steering and momentum and everything else as you bounce over the curbs and get right up to the walls. Wall of Champions is the famous one, but actually there's another couple that you can easily clip as well, and we've seen plenty in the past at turns 4 and turns 9, the right-left chicanes where you can drop it on the exit there. I really like it. It looks like it should be simple. It's not. It's a really complex circuit to drive.
Yeah, but what is the complex thing about it, Hinch? Why? Yes, because it's not that many corners. So why is this one so demanding?
I think there's two elements that make it so difficult. Is it's got all these super inviting brake zones, right? And drivers love being the last of the late breakers, but that could come at the cost of the exits. And to Jolyon's point, these are all just chicanes. It's corner combos, but it's 2 corner combos. It doesn't really go much past that. So you can gain a lot of time on the brakes, but there's a good chance you're going to lose something on the exits. And these chicanes are all followed by long straights. So it's it tempts you into just wanting to brake later and brake later. But sometimes, eventually that payoff doesn't work out anymore. And then the other side of it is the curb riding. There are some curbs that are friendly and you can take quite a bit, others less friendly, but you still have to take quite a bit. Mistakes are so easily penalized because there's walls everywhere, like Jolyon pointed out. So it is, I think characterful is a great way to describe it, but it's a lot of fun to race on.
Technically, how demanding is it? I'm showing my age now, but I'll never forget the 2004 race there when both Toyota and Williams were excluded from the final results, both for brake infringements. I think Ralf Schumacher had even finished P2 in the Williams. I mean, is it one of the most demanding tracks for brakes?
It definitely is. You got just loads of these just stabs on the brakes, and you don't pick up huge speed until basically you come back round to the final chicane, or into the first braking zone as well. A lot of it is you're building up reasonable speed and then slamming on the brakes with a bit of a sort of spiky brake trace, 90-degree corners, and then you get out to the next one. They're quite bumpy as well, some of the braking zones, particularly turn 8, the right kind of in the middle of the lap. It's tricky, and you're always, I don't know if the brake cooling is always at a bit of a premium there. I remember Nico Rosberg in 2014. It was one of Mercedes when they were romping everything, and he was struggling with the brakes as well. And it was one of Danny Rick's wins, wasn't it? It was his first win, I think, in 2014. So it's always one of those ones that's pretty marginal, and it just adds to the challenge of things.
How do you approach a quick lap? Because a lot has been made, during the build-up to this race, that, this is a significant race for George Russell. He's always gone well here, right? Why does he go well here? What do you need? Is it being good on the brakes? Let's go back to the brakes.
Yeah, I think being efficient on the brakes is certainly a strength here. I think George is one of the drivers that is good at being a late breaker. Lewis was always very good here. He's kind of known for that as well. So that is a huge part of it. But again, it is that balance because you still have to get off the corners, right? It's all about longitudinal grip here. There's not a lot of high speed. There's really no high speed corners at all. It's not about the lateral setup. It's about how you can stop the car and start the car in a straight line, and then how you ride the curbs. Being able to judge how much curb to take at a few of these places is so difficult, and it takes just a special kind of finesse, especially that final chicane, because it can go so wrong. And yeah, I think George's, his left foot is very well trained and well suited for this kind of track.
And the walls, do they affect how you approach it? Or, I mean, let's talk about that wall of champions at the exit of the final corner, right? Are you always a little bit concerned, JP, as you hitting the brakes going into that corner combo, or does it feel like as if there was no wall at all? Do you have to treat it as if there was no wall at all?
So you buckle up as you're heading up to that final chicane. So you got such a long run. You're on a good lap. You come out of the hairpin. You shuffle up through the gears as you're building speed. And then you're thinking, right, deep exhale. Let's take a little bit on the brakes. But then the trick, I think, generally is, okay, you can't brake early, but releasing the brakes is where you're going to gain the speed through the minimum. So early on in practice, you get a chance to build up on the brakes there because you've got a bit of runoff. So everyone's going to attack and find a sensible place on the brakes. When you get to qualifying and you're trying to be a hero, last throws of qualifying, I think don't take the last 10 meters on the brakes. Just brake softer, release the brakes, carry the speed through the apexes. To do that, you need a bit more grip. The track rubbers up. Also, to do that, you need to maybe get a bit more risky with the curbs, as Hinch was saying. So that's where you just think, right, deep breath, let's go for it. Let's attack with another couple of kph apex speed. And at that point, you're going to risk just running out of space on the exit. But that's basically what you do in Montreal. It's the final big thing. And if you're on a good lap, if you're cautious there, you're just going to lose a couple of tenths in the final chicane. So you have to still attack all the way to the line, keep it to the right-hand side, minimise your distance. I think the best lap in Montreal is going to basically scrape the wall. It's going to be one of those ones where you get the perfect just brush on the exit, and then you just hug the grass line on the way down to the end of the lap. And if you get it right, you feel like a bit of a legend there.
And the other thing that's so interesting about it is you have to nail it twice for one good lap because it is the final corner. If you don't get a good launch through there, if you're not floating a bunch of speed to come and start the lap, you're already starting the lap a couple kph down and you're losing a few hundreds down to turn one. So it's kind of annoying because it's the most treacherous corner on the track. And for a good quali lap, you do have to nail it twice.
What are track grip conditions like? And there's a really busy support program this year for the first time. In the past, there's been the Ferrari Challenge and not much else. This year, we've got F2, of course. It's the second leg of their North American doubleheader. We've got F1 Academy there as well. So how's that going to affect grip levels?
I think we saw in Miami, actually, the track grip came up pretty high quite quickly. So in free practice for F1, it wasn't so much a procession of cleaning up the track as we've seen in Miami, which is a temporary circuit as well, which had F2. They're both sprint weekends, so I would expect it would be actually quite nice for the F1 drivers to have an F2 session on before, just to put some Pirelli rubber down on the racing line and start to clear it up. Because Montreal as well is one of those ones where you're on the Ile Notre Dame. It's really peaceful when you're out. Have you been trackside, TC? During a race weekend, it's lovely and peaceful. You're by the waterways on this island. There's just birds just cheeping out in the distance. Groundhogs all around. You're in nature's paradise. So imagine when a Formula One car turns up on a Friday morning for the first time. That's why the groundhogs get a bit of a fright, because they're like, "What on earth is this?" But it does also mean the track is generally it builds up a lot. Is very green on a Friday. I remember it was always, Montreal was, for a similar reason, was one where how many tear-offs am I getting through? Just bug splat all day on the Friday. And then maybe they get the memo as well through the weekend. So having F2 there will give the animals and the wildlife a little bit of a wake-up as well before F1 and clean the track up. Should be helpful.
This episode is sponsored by Lisa. If there's one thing I know for certain, after a long run of races and uncomfortable airport seating, it's that you really do appreciate your own bed. And I'm sure a lot of people in the F1 paddock will agree with me. Hotel beds are all well and good, but there's something about getting home and finally sleeping properly again that you just can't beat, which is partly why I finally decided it's time to replace our mattress at home. But to be honest, I didn't really know where to start looking. I just know that if a mattress is too firm or too soft, my back definitely lets me know about it. But Lisa's online sleep quiz was genuinely really helpful. It asks about things like sleep position, firmness, whether you sleep hot and the sort of support that you need, and it pointed me towards the Sapira Hybrid. Medium firm, breathable, and designed with a combination of supportive springs and memory foam. Honestly, it sounds perfect for me and I can't wait to try it. Lisa's mattresses are designed and assembled in the USA, and they've even been awarded Best Hybrid and Best Memory Foam Mattresses by New York Times Wirecutter. Plus, they make the whole process really straightforward with free shipping, easy returns, and a 120-night sleep trial. So go to lisa.com for 30% off select mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with the promo code NATION, exclusive to our listeners. That's Lisa, LEESA.com, promo code NATION for 30% off select mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. And support our show and let them know that we sent you after checkout. Lisa.com, promo code NATION. Let's talk about this championship fight now. The intra-team battle between the leader, Kimi Antonelli, and George Russell, who's in P2. Now, Hinch, you said in our Miami review that it's not panic mode yet for George, but if he doesn't beat Kimi in Montreal, that's when he might need to start being concerned. Can you expand on that and tell us why you think this weekend coming is such a crucial one in the championship fight?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it comes from the fact that, Kimi's victories up to this point have been impressive. Two of the three have kind of had, we've said we've starred them in the record books as there were some elements of, I hate to say luck, but to a certain extent luck. And also tracks that George maybe hasn't been as competitive on, tracks that we know Kimi has been. He was quick in Suzuka last year. He was very quick in Miami last year. So I don't think it was a surprise given the form that he's had, end of last season, early part of this season, that he was quick. 3 wins on the trot. that's starting to give a driver a lot of confidence. That's starting to get the team to maybe look at one side of the garage in a different light than the other. And Montreal is a track that we know George does run well at. So it's not an excuse like we had at Miami, where he kind of went into the weekend knowing it wasn't his favorite place. Maybe some of it was, self-fulfilling there and in the performance. And, you've got the upgrades coming from Mercedes. That'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays into this all. Maybe there's an update that affects one driver more than the other. We saw it last year with their suspension that they brought that sort of knocked Kimi a little bit down and didn't affect George quite as much. But if we get to Montreal, we get through Montreal, and Kimi's, even if he doesn't win the race, this is what we were saying last week, even if he doesn't win the race, if he just is ahead of George at a track that George runs well on the run that he's on, that's when you have to start being a little bit concerned, because we know what Kimi's been capable of this year. And, Miami was by far, I think, his most complete Grand Prix weekend, and he's just going to keep getting better.
I pretty well agree with that. I mean, I do think George, he's had the last 2 poles in Canada. He won last year comfortably when Mercedes didn't have a great season. He does go well at this circuit. On top of that, Mercedes are really good around Montreal. It's always been classically the colder temperatures that suit them, but for a long time now they've been quick. And so you've got these factors plus some expected pretty major Mercedes upgrades coming. Should mean that one of them will win the race this weekend. And so it's most likely a battle for the win between the Mercedes duo. And if Kimi gets it again, you start to think, wow, that's 4 in a row. You've won at one of George's strongest circuits on record. And the championship lead will go over 25 points. So all of that would say, hey, this is now a proper scrap for George Russell to try and recover. A little bit like we saw with Lando Norris last year. Right now, I think it's still in his hands. He's controllable. But if he doesn't win this weekend, you start to think, okay, maybe this is Kimi's year.
What was your take on how Antonelli performed in Montreal last year? I mean, the gap to George, I think, was 0.4 in qualifying. And then, of course, he finishes third and gets his first podium in Formula One. I mean, we talk about how good George is. How would you guys view Antonelli's performance last year? Can he feel confident coming into this weekend that he can shine a light and at least run George close, if nothing else?
If we're honest, it was pretty much a half a second gap he had to George in qualifying last year. That shouldn't have been enough to get him on the podium. I think it was a great race from him to get the podium. He held off charging faster cars later on. The McLarens were bearing down on him. And it was a first podium. 18-year-old, there is that. It was great. But when you actually think the half a second gap, that's quite a lot in Formula One terms. That's similar to what Yuki had compared to Max in the year. So that's actually what Kimi had to George last year. So it was a kind of flattering podium, I would say, for Kimi. I think the race was better than the qualifying, and he held pace there. But I don't think the fact that he got the podium will show that he was good as well. I think there was actually quite a gap to George.
Interesting stat, by the way. So it was Kimi's first podium. He became the 3rd youngest driver in F1 history to stand on a podium. I know you're both good at your history. Who stood on a podium who was younger than Antonelli last year? Can you remember?
Who was
Cut me a couple of names.
In history?
Yeah.
So it's I think Hinch.
Max
have you
has
got
got to
it?
be one, right?
Max is one.
Yeah, and the great Canadian, isn't it?
It is the great Canadian.
The other great Canadian, Hinch.
Yeah.
Baku, of course.
Yeah. Lance Stroll.
Baku 2017, Lance Stroll, yeah.
Yeah, 2017.
I'm not sure he's going to be troubling the scorers this year, Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. Look, worst case scenario for George Russell now is that McLaren are bringing the second part of the upgrade that they started in Miami last time out. Worst case scenario is that McLaren are super competitive, right? And Lando or Oscar wins the race. Antonelli beats George, and Mercedes suddenly realise that they've got a serious fight on their hands with McLaren. How do you think Toto Wolff is going to handle that going forward? Are we going to see a number one, number two scenario at Mercedes? The number one becoming Kimi Antonelli?
No. Not
at
a
no
chance.
point.
Not a chance at this stage. It would be... I just don't think that would be a sensible call from Toto. I think, as we're sitting here, if I said I gave you a year's worth of salary that you have to put on someone being champion this year, guys, you have to put it on. Who are you going to put it on right now?
We've had this discussion. We've done this little thought experiment. And when you and I had this conversation, I said George Russell, and that was pre-Miami, to be fair. But I think I'd still, if you had to put everything on one guy today, I still look at the data set, the data sample size that we have of Russell's performances. It's just so much greater than that of Kimi's, as impressive as his has been this year. And if you're betting the farm, I would still go George.
Interesting. Because I would
you
now,
Kimi
today, I'd be with Kimi. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of you's lost the
farm. What about you?
I would go George, because I just think history has shown us that he is able to be consistent over the year. I think he's got a little bit more maturity on his side. I still feel like he's got the upper hand overall. And I think Kimi has shown bursts of pace that have been really impressive. He showed some great races last year. Miami was one. Hinch already mentioned that Miami and Japan were strong. Also, you look at Brazil, you look at various other drives. Yeah, very good. But in terms of actually doing it over a season, not having a blooper race, not having an Oscar Baku race where he just had a terrible half lap and the whole thing was blown. And that's where I think probably the mindset of George is a bit more tested at this stage. It's not to say he'll do it, but that would be my logic in thinking, if I had to back everything on one, I think I would have to go with George at the moment, which is why I don't think Toto should plump everything behind one. Even the fact that we have disagreements, it shows this is not black and white, even if Kimi beats George, I think.
Well, I just have been so impressed by the step that Kimi Antonelli has made this year. Yes, you're absolutely right. When you look at last year, there was a huge difference between George and Kimi. I feel that's just diminished hugely this year. And take as you find, over the opening four races, there's no doubt in my mind that Kimi Antonelli, a few starts aside, has done the better job. So why can't he continue for the next 18 races or whatever we've got left?
Well, let me ask you this, TC. How impressed were you with Oscar Piastri's jump at this point in the season last year from the year before?
Huge, but I mean, that's the point. These guys at the start of their
He
Formula
lost the
1
championship.
careers,
He lost the championship to his more experienced teammate.
Sure, but my point is that at the start of their career, these young guys are making huge steps from one season to the next. And I think George is now at the point where it's diminishing returns, and so therefore the steps get smaller. So the gap between George and Kimi, I think, is negligible. And I think that Kimi's sort of... he doesn't have a care in the world. I love the fact that he doesn't seem to tighten up. He's enjoying it. I think he's protected by Toto Wolff brilliantly in terms of not putting pressure on him. He reminds me so much of Lewis Hamilton 2007 spec, when he, let's not forget that Lewis could so easily have won that championship. He got those 9 podiums on the bounce to start the year until he then won his first race in Canada 2007. So I think it can be done, and I think Kimi's made enough of a step to do it. But hey, it's going to play out, right?
I think you bring up a good point. That's one worth noting is, Toto Wolff, even post Miami, is still saying we have to protect him. We've got to make sure he stays grounded. We've got to make sure that the good days don't big him up too much, that the bad days don't get him down too much. You don't have to do that with George. George has a level of experience and a level of maturity that he can go through a whole season without another phone call from Toto, and he'll be fine. Kimi still, the team is still outwardly projecting that they kind of have to bubble wrap this kid a little bit because they need to make sure he stays in this place. And if anything makes him deviate off that, there could be issues, that's just one of those things. As an investor, when you're looking at betting your life savings on something, that's an element that makes me nervous compared to George, who's a bit more of a known quantity in that sense.
But compare, Hinch, the dip in the European season last year, starting at Imola actually, for Kimi. I don't think we'll see that again this year. I think he learnt a lot. I think having him in that car last year,
why do you think that?
Why? Because I'm seeing a very consistent driver this year, and I think he's learning from all the mistakes he made last year.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just seeing, just curious.
Yeah.
You know, he's had a good run, and he's won the 3 races, and we're all singing his praises.
I'm not saying that George Russell's
job.
not going to bounce back. George Russell could easily win this Grand Prix by 10 seconds and, relaunch his championship campaign. That is a very realistic proposition. But my point is that I think Kimi has the consistency now and will be a very real threat for the whole year.
This is uncharted waters, though, isn't it, for Kimi? I think that's the difference. And I think with George, the season that he ran last year was a title-winning season if he had the right car, I think. Kimi's wasn't. We haven't had that European season to confirm that he can be consistent over 20, 22 races, 24 races. We could easily have said the same for Oscar. The comparison, I think, with Oscar and Lando last year is a great one because we're in a really similar position. Oscar had another year under his belt, but the step was also big. He had Lando under huge pressure. Then Zandvoort happened, and suddenly I would have bet the house on Oscar after that. But Lando found that other gear that George potentially still has in his locker at the same time as Oscar started to struggle. Maybe it was a run of low grip tracks. JP, maybe it was a little bit of title wearing pressures and everything else.
JP, sorry to interrupt you, but you say then Zandvoort happened, right? Yeah. Well, I'll then say then Monza happened. And I think the ramifications of the swap at Monza really affected Oscar Piastri. And I think that sort of situation won't happen at Mercedes because of the way Toto Wolff is approaching the season and approaching the way he looks after Kimi Antonelli.
So Kimi wins in Montreal. No, McLaren were 1-2 in Montreal. They had the best car. Kimi's third. George is fourth. You are saying all in for Kimi. I've seen enough.
No, I was asking the question. JP. No, of course. I was asking the question. Of course, it's too early to go all in for Kimi. But I think it would, to Hinch's point in our Miami review, I think that is the moment where George has really then got to step it up when we go to Monaco next time out. Otherwise, Mercedes might have to start making some difficult decisions come the summer break.
And they're a team that have got history of making those decisions, which McLaren haven't in recent times. We saw with Valtteri and Lewis, the famous give the place back. That was when Valtteri was out of championship contention and Lewis was still sort of tenuously defending from Seb. So maybe that will happen. And McLaren still are confident that they can be a regular race winner as the season progresses. So I agree. For all the debate, this is a huge weekend for George Russell. So we take it back to that part. And I do think he has to show what he can do here. And also the next point you make is Monaco's around the corner. Not an easy race for anyone. Might not be a Mercedes stronghold circuit. There's been years in the past where they've dominated, but couldn't get ahead around Monaco. So you don't want to rely on Monaco being the one you're going to bounce back because you might just be kicking the can down the road.
Let's talk a little more about McLaren now, because of course it was Montreal last year that was the scene of the crash between Oscar and Lando. Only a handful of laps left to go in the race when Lando Norris tried to sneak up the left-hand side of Oscar, but between him and the pit wall, and of course hits his teammate, race over. Lando, to his credit, apologised immediately. How much does an incident like that hang over the drivers? I mean, they'll smile about it, but does it in any way carry forward to the next time you race there?
There's no thoughts about that going into this weekend for either of those guys until Thursday when people like us bring it up in the press conference. But
I think you bank it though as a driver. If you're Oscar, you bank it. And I'm not saying he's going to still be lingering on that. I think they're long gone because of the Monza thing and the everything else that played out, Singapore and Austin and everything else. But I remember Felipe Nasr when I was teammates with him in GP2, and he tried a move at turn 3 in Barcelona on the inside of me late on. It was for second place, and he basically just drilled into the back of me. And I was like, I think he came off worse than me, but I was like, we're not going to fall out about this. But now I know how you're going to race, and I don't love it. So next time we go wheel to wheel, I'm going to be that little bit more aggressive. I had the same thing with K-Mag.
10 years on, you're over it, aren't you?
Well, no, I'm still bitter about it, TC. So if I ever get back behind the wheel and I've got Felipe Nasr as my teammate, he's going to pay a heavy price for that Barcelona race. No, you do. You have to bank these things, I think, as a driver, because you're learning a little bit about your rival. As I said, for the McLaren guys, they learned a huge amount more. I think that was the first flashpoint, wasn't it, between them? And then they had more. And I think they're coming to Montreal in a different position as well. I think they will be a little bit more cooperative with each other. There's not, as it stands, the championship on the line. Whether they finish 4th or 5th, it's not as important as it was last year. But I think they're figuring out stuff on each other the whole time. What
about Red Bull? Hinch, after what you saw in Miami with the Red Bull upgrade, of course, Max now much happier with the steering rack and the feeling he's getting through the wheel. Can we see Max challenging?
I think it's possible, yeah. It just allows Max to do Max things, right? And this is the kind of circuit where you can take those kinds of risks that he just is so good at taking and pulling off, right? Executing in those chicanes, riding those curbs. I know curb riding's not been a particular strength of the Red Bull historically, but new rule set, maybe it'll be a little bit better this time. But I think, again, it's another kind of low grip circuit like we had in Miami. We know he is comfortable on the absolute limit. So if the car continues to improve and they can continue to dial in performance, now that they've got it handling in a way that is speaking to him, yeah, there's no reason why he can't be in the mix.
Hinch, you've done some endurance racing, right? Now, Max was doing the Nürburgring 24 hours last weekend. How long does it take you to get over a 24-hour race? Is he going to be on his A? A kind of serious question. Will he arrive in Montreal just a little bit jaded, or do you think it doesn't affect someone like him?
No, I think he's fine. He's been doing 24-hour sim races, during Grand Prix weekends in the past.
True. Do you remember Imola a couple of years ago? Yeah.
Exactly. So, no, look, he's young, he's fit, he's prepared, he knows what he's getting into. So I don't think it'll hit him too much at all.
Didn't Nico Hülkenberg, he won Le Mans about a decade ago now, and then I think he turned up in the Force India to Austria and qualified it straight up in the top 3 again. Or he had a really strong showing when he returned, and bearing in mind he hadn't had a podium at the time, it was another great chance for him. So that was a winning Le Mans.
Well, and do you know what? I was at that Le Mans in 2015 when the Hulk won for Porsche, and he'd had a damn good party on the Sunday night, I can tell you that.
And so even then he turned up fresh the next week.
Yes, exactly. Now, look, guys, what about Ferrari, right? So this is a Hamilton track. He's won this race 7 times, which is equal with Michael Schumacher as the most successful driver in the Montreal Grand Prix history. It feels, in the same way that it's a big weekend for George Russell, this feels equally big for Lewis Hamilton, because after being quite close to teammate Charles Leclerc early on this season, the gap seems to have grown, and this is the weekend where he's sort of got to bring it back under control again, really. Do you guys agree with me?
I think so. I think that his track record around Canada is really supreme. He has only been out-qualified by a teammate 3 times out of 16 attempts. So is a pretty good track record. Out-qualified Charles last year, although I think Charles had a kind of a better pace and missed it right at the end of Q3. But it does feel like he needs to just halt that downwards momentum now as well. After those early few races, very upbeat Lewis, loves the new rules, input in the car's good. The Ferrari was obviously a competitive race-leading car. Still was in Miami, but just not with Lewis. So he sort of chipped away at it through the Miami weekend as well and got quite close. But I think Canada's circuit, he's always been really strong at 7 wins, 6 poles. He needs to get it back here, I think. I think Ferrari should have a sensible car still. And if you're Lewis, then you do just turn up with a little bit more swag at a circuit you've always gone well at.
But is it one of those things? It's almost the same argument that we're using with the Mercedes pair, right? Where Kimi's season last year started very strong. All the races that we've done up to this point, he was very competitive at. Get to Canada, obviously had a great race, finished on the podium, but in relation to George was a bit off the pace. Last year with Lewis, right? We go through the first couple rounds, strong in China last year, strong in China this year, a little bit off in Miami last year, a little bit off in Miami this year. It seems to be almost following a similar sort of script. So, like you say, Charles probably had a little bit more out and out pace last year, even though Lewis did qualify ahead of him. Do we think that this is an important one for Lewis, going to a track that he knows so well, that he runs so well at, that if he is behind Charles again this weekend, that it is an indication that maybe, though he's had his fingerprint on this car from the beginning, it's still not quite what he needs it to be?
That's exactly it, I think. Or I think even for Lewis, if they're just close on pace, I think that's fine. If they're just back in the mix together, on the same row on the grid, and we're talking about the 2 Ferraris being in contention, rather than can Charles win it, which felt like it was the case through Miami. You had Charles trying to hunt down the McLarens in the sprint. You had Charles leading half the Grand Prix. All the while, Lewis, I know he had a bit of damage in the Grand Prix, but he was sort of there because he was fighting with Colapinto at the start. He was just struggling a little bit more for that last couple of tenths. And if it's the same on a circuit he's always been good at, the next one, once again, is Monaco. I know Lewis has been all right in Monaco, but Charles has been brilliant in Monaco. It's his home track. He's sensational around there. So, you'll start to see a picture if Lewis can't be strong in Canada, that you're thinking, okay, the season's just drifting away from him again. So it's a big one.
And when you think of the season, I feel that this coming weekend is the moment where we're going to see sort of the pecking order as I think it probably will stay for the rest of the year, because Mercedes are bringing their upgrades. Ferrari are hopefully going to understand the upgrades they brought to Miami a little better. We're going to see McLaren bring the second half of their upgrades. Red Bull are going to bring a bit more. And then we get into the busy European season where it's bash, 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 and everything happens so relentlessly that I feel that we're going to leave Montreal knowing the lay of the land at the front end at the very least. And it feels significant somehow for Ferrari, because since Miami, okay, there's been this 3-week break, and the news cycle in Formula One never stops, but there's been speculation about Charles Leclerc's future. Have Aston Martin made him a bid for him? Have Red Bull Racing made a bid for him? And you just wonder, with the driver silly season starting to kick into gear, is this the moment where Charles is going to say, okay, where are we in the pecking order? I've been here since 2019. Are you going to give me a car that I can challenge for the championship with, or am I going to have to go elsewhere? It kind of, for me, feels significant in that way. Yeah,
and he'll know what's coming up in the pipeline as well behind the big Miami upgrade and the understanding of them. So typically in a season, you get this sort of Miami weekend, Montreal weekend. This sort of used to be Spain, didn't it? Where you bring this sort of first major upgrade package. And then you'll see something around sort of Austria, Silverstone, could be Spa now, weekend, midsummer, for a conventional big aero platform difference and a new floor, new aero surfaces that'll spruce the car for a few tenths. And then it'll be little bits and bobs of tweaking through the rest of the year. So Charles will know if Ferrari are telling him, this is good, let's fight. I'm sure Monaco, he can be fighting for a win anyway. Maybe he can be there this weekend on a circuit that could suit Ferrari a bit more. And if they're saying just hold in, because wait, when we get to Silverstone, we've got the proper package coming, and he'll know that. We don't know that at the moment. So if they don't have anything more, if they're sort of thinking, okay, we'll bring a little bit bits and bobs, but no big upgrade package, and they're not competitive right now. I just think if you're Charles, you have to start looking elsewhere. He's been so loyal to Ferrari. He came through the ranks with them, did a year at Sauber, got into the main seat in 2019, and he's just been sensational. I think his level of performance is clearly worthy of a championship. So he has to start looking around. If Ferrari can't deliver even a championship challenge, he has to be a driver that has the talent to at least see a championship challenge one day. And I think this is the time. New set of regs. If it's not Ferrari, then where can I go to try and mount this?
Oh, yeah, good question. Where can he go?
Well, because I mean, he's made this point, right? How desperately he wants to win a championship with Ferrari, but at some point that loyalty has to waver if they're just incapable, after a decade of him driving there, of providing him with a car to fight for a championship. Where do you go? That's a tough question right now. I don't think there's an obvious answer, not knowing where, is Piastri going anywhere? Probably not. The Mercedes pair staying? Probably. The domino's really Max, isn't it? That's what makes this whole conversation interesting. If not, I don't really see another option. He's not going to Aston Martin. That's not a risk worth taking, right?
He doesn't need the money, does he?
No. Based on the boat he just took delivery of, he's doing just fine. So I think what it does do is it gives him maybe a little bit more negotiating power with Ferrari too, as bad as this might sound. I mean, he signed a record-breaking historical contract with Ferrari in terms of its length, right? I don't think he's going to sign for another 5 years. I think if he decides to re-up, it's going to be very much shorter term without clauses, and it's going to be more kind of a Charles biased sort of contract. He's earned that. The team, I think, understands that if they want to hang on to him, they're going to have to acquiesce on some of those things, and it does put him in a position of power negotiating next time.
I mean, in mid-27, he is going to become the driver who's done more races for Ferrari than anyone else. He's going to pass Michael Schumacher. Now, Michael Schumacher at Ferrari won 5 world titles. Charles might have won 1 in that time if the cards fall for him in the second half of 2026, but it's looking unlikely as we sit here now. And that has to make you question your loyalty, I think. When you just look at the stats, you've now done more races for this team. You've only won a handful, let alone world titles.
But the difficulty is where does he go? That is the problem. You've got.
Would you go to Red Bull if Max leaves? Is Red Bull a better bet at this stage? It feels to me like a team in transition, but at this stage, is Red Bull a better bet than Ferrari?
You'd want some serious assurances if you're going to go to Red Bull, just because of the exodus of people. We spoke about it when GP announced his move to McLaren that's impending. You want to know who they're bringing in to restructure the team, to take it back towards the championship. Because if he doesn't have a lot of faith that Ferrari are going to be champions, there's not a lot right now that says that Red Bull can if they lose Max as well. And you've got to sort of restart this, new driver coming in, new race engineers, all these partnerships once again. They're doing a good job. Their upgrade package for Miami was great. Their power units, really impressive. But you're leaving Ferrari, who are capable of race wins this year, I reckon, for a Red Bull, who are certainly not going to fight for a title this year either. Aston Martin, as we said, that's such a long-term project. I don't see him doing that. If Max leaves Red Bull, could someone else be suckered into taking that Red Bull seat? And then Charles could look at a McLaren or a Mercedes if that door would open.
Because that was the one rumor, right? Was Piastri is being courted by Red Bull as a potential Max replacement. So then, yeah, if Max leaves and Piastri moves, then I think that's a no-brainer. I think if you're Charles, you have to consider that.
Hinch, do you think that rumour of Piastri to Red Bull was started by Charles' management to try and force the situation so that he can then go to McLaren?
TC, I hadn't thought about that, but now I hope so, just because it makes a better story.
Unbelievable play, if it is. And then it happens.
All right, then. Predictions time. Give me, both of you guys, I want a sprint winner and then the top 3 for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll go. We were playing chicken there. We were both doing like the big inhale as if we're about to speak, hoping the other guy went first. No, okay. So I think that I think George will win the sprint. Well, actually, no. Do I? I don't know. Yeah, I think George will win the sprint. It's a short run from pole. It's a short run down to turn one. Less opportunity for them to have a bad start. And he's been still a little bit better on the starts than Kimi, even though it's not been Kimi's fault some of the time. The team's admitted that. This is not throwing shade at Kimi. And I think he wins the Grand Prix. I think this is what it starts to turn. The tides turn. The championship tightens back up. But I do think it's going to be a Mercedes track. So I'm going to go George, Kimi, Lando.
Okay. JP?
Pretty good. That's pretty good. That's the problem with winning the chicken is then you look like a chicken if you just back the other guy.
You should have gone first, JP.
Yeah, damn it. So I'll throw in a curveball here, and I'm going to say Charles wins the sprint because I think the Ferrari team can get up to speed pretty quickly. I think they'll have that start advantage, and I can see them being pretty efficient around Montreal as well. It's their handling characteristics should be good for 2/3 of it. They'll obviously be a little bit struggling down into the final chicane, but I think he's shown great racecraft so far. So in the sprint, I think he can win. In the race, I don't see him on the podium, though. I see it being exactly as you say, Hinch. I'm fully backing you here. It's Russell, Antonelli, and Norris, your top three.
Do you think the Ferrari start advantage? Do you think the Ferrari start advantage will be so noticeable, given what Hinch was saying about it being, a short run to turn one?
It's similar. I mean, Miami's a short run to the first corner, and still it was enough for them to charge through. The only thing with them is whether Mercedes can get on top of their starts a little bit more as well. They're still trying to understand it, but their starts are still bad. If they're no better than they were in Miami, with obviously Kimi's were terrible, but George's weren't good enough either. If they can't improve as a team, they won't be leading the first lap. The only thing is McLaren starts are good with the same power unit. So Charles is going to actually have to outqualify the McLarens to jump them both off the line, because otherwise you'll see sort of Lando or Oscar probably gazump the Mercedes in the way that the Ferraris usually do.
Well, look, my predictions, I think George is going to win. I think George is going to win the sprint and the Grand Prix, and I think Kimi's going to be second, and I'm going to go for Oscar for P3 on Sunday. But I think the gap between George and Kimi is going to be really close. So while the gap will start to shrink in the Drivers' Championship, I think Antonelli will come out of this race feeling like he's had a good one, because he, instead of the gap being 4/10, 5/10 as it was last year in qualifying, I think it's going to be down to a 10th.
And then he'll get all the backing from the Mercedes team to go on the title charge for the next 18 races, yeah?
That's it, mate. You're predicting the future. Look, while we're talking about drivers and how they approach championships, Canada always brings back memories for me of Jenson Button's sensational victory from the very back of the grid in what turned out to be the longest F1 race in the history of the sport back in 2011, more than 4 hours. And Jenson's my latest guest on F1 Beyond the Grid. And while we were reflecting on 20 years since his first win in Hungary, 2006, it led us onto a really interesting discussion about driver insecurities.
As drivers, we're flawed. We are insecure. And I'll go for any driver. When I hear Lewis Hamilton on the radio last year in the Ferrari, when he asks a question, they don't come back to him. And he's like, have I done something wrong? It's like, you're a 7-time world champion. The confidence you should have is out of this world. But, insecurities creep in.
Insecurities drive you on, I suppose, as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, you forget what you've achieved, and you just think about that last session. You're like, I'm not good enough. I was 2/10 behind my teammate. It's crazy, and the pressure you put yourself under, it's enormous, and that's why you see so many drivers fail in the sport, even though they have the talent. Mentally, they're just in a really dark place, and I've heard it from many drivers, and we think of it as a weakness, so we don't talk about it. And that's what amazed me with Lando, the way he's been outspoken over the last couple of years of mental health. Really, really good. And I think that gives you a lot of strength.
JB was really strong on that, and it was a wonderful chat. And thank you, Jenson, for your time. But I'd love your thoughts, JP and Hinch, on just your own experiences of insecurities. I mean, is it the insecurities that drive you on, the constant need to prove yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of drivers thrive off an inherent fear of failure, right? It's hating to lose more than loving to win. And I think it's such a competitive environment, motorsports, that it breeds that insecurity, right? It's not a win or lose proposition. You can finish second, you can finish 8th, you can finish 12th, but you can go down that dark hole if a teammate especially is beating you on a given day. And racing drivers' memories are really short. You know, we love bigging ourselves up when we've had a good day, but we're just as quick to knock ourselves down internally when we've had a bad day. And I have to echo, Jenson's sentiments there. And I said it throughout last year. I was super impressed with how Lando approached the year, how he approached his own struggles, how he spoke about them so openly. I don't think it was just good for him. I do think it's going to have a waterfall effect in a very positive way for the future of not just racing drivers, but athletes in general. There's kind of been a movement in professional sports that is, a lot of athletes have been more openly talking about, mental health and some of their struggles. But for sure, you have some unbelievably dark days as a driver. I had them more often than not. Because again, unless you're winning, as often as say Alex Palou is in IndyCar or as Max Verstappen was in 23, it's hard not to kind of fall down that path.
And do you think JP, do you think Max Verstappen, for everything he's achieved in Formula One in recent seasons, do you think he still has insecurities?
No, I don't. I think that he's, the most all-round talented driver in the world, isn't he? So I think he knows that. He demolishes teammates for fun. Honestly, I'm slightly surprised to hear Jenson almost describe the extent of it from him. I can only speak from my personal experience, which was in Formula One, I got pretty well battered in 2017 by Nico Hülkenberg. 2016, I had my ups and downs, always felt like I could have a good run, but of course the level of competitiveness is so intense that you can be me in 2016, you can be anyone in the field, you could be Lewis with Nico Rosberg, you'd be Lewis now with everything that he's achieved. If you don't have a good lap, you're not going to win. And if you don't put it on paper, it goes down as a loss forever. So there's a little bit of that in your mind that you need to bank the result, but that's kind of professional sport, isn't it? I'm surprised with the level of his success that Jenson had, that he kind of feels it in that way. Obviously, he had a very different career to mine. So I can't really explain it from that side. But you look around and you just I see a lot of drivers just brimming with confidence. You see Ollie Behrman walking around the paddock, young guy. I think he has so much inner confidence in his abilities. I don't see that level of insecurity. But
you have to be self-critical, JP.
100%. And there's a difference, I think, between if any time you can do something better, you have to look at it and take responsibility for what's yours. You have to own it and also point the finger if you think someone's let you down in the team. If you think that your setup wasn't right, you went with someone rather than your own feeling, or the way you left the garage wasn't right, which you hear a lot. You say, "Why, guys? Why are we in traffic?" And you have to have ownership of that, I think.
I think there's an important thing too, though, that you can have those moments of doubt, but you also have to believe you can pull yourself out of it. I think that's where, Jenson talks about some very talented drivers that don't make it. I think that's the differentiator for me in some of these cases is you can have that moment where you get beat or you make a mistake or whatever, and you get down on yourself, but you have to believe that you've got the ability to turn it around, right? Even if I got beat in a session, I'd go look at the data and I'd say like, okay, anything that this driver can do, I can do. I never thought that somebody could do something I couldn't. It was in the moment they did it and I didn't, right?
So I used to have this thing where any time after any session, it could be on the way up to Formula One or even in Formula One, I'd literally get a printout of a track map, look through the data of our best laps and just write down where my time losses were and why. Just so I could simplify. The guy's got the same car as me. If he's braking 10 meters later, right, I need to write that down and bank it, because I have to have the belief that, okay, he's doing that. I can see that he's doing that. So let's go out and try and do that and improve. And of course, it's not so easy. And you come back in and now he's braking earlier, but still going quicker or whatever. I
hate that so much.
Yeah, it really sucks. But then I write down braking earlier, going quicker. And I'm just on this loser of a trail. But in my career, I wouldn't say until 2017 that you always, I think it's a fear of failure, isn't it? It's a fear of not putting down a result on paper that you think justifies it. You respect the competition so much that you know that if you miss a lap, they're going to beat you. So there's a little bit of that. But until 2017 came along and I got absolutely pulped, I always felt like I didn't feel like I necessarily would have called it like an insecurity for a lot of my career.
It's fascinating that both of you have spoken about a fear of failure rather than it being a lure of success, rather than it being, I really want to win this race. It's, I don't want to let myself down. I don't want to fail. It's fascinating that it's that way around.
You feel like you've got something in your grasp. So when I was winning GP2, it was the fear of letting the opportunity slip more than becoming the champion. I knew that I could do it, but every time you were just like another weekend of extending the championship lead, of taking a win, it was, of course you celebrate the win, but you know that you have this gilt-edged chance. You have to go and take it. And it goes both ways, but it's just, how do you live with yourself if you blow it from here?
It's a fascinating discussion. And Jenson, thanks again for giving us those thoughts. And you can listen to Jenson on F1 Beyond the Grid now, and you can watch it on the F1 YouTube channel as well. Well, guys, thank you both very much. Another show done and dusted. For those of you listening at home, in selected countries, you can watch the Canadian Grand Prix on F1 TV. As usual, in the US, the race will also be available on Apple TV. And for the first time this weekend, Netflix as well. And of course, you can keep across all the action on F1.com, the F1 app, and at F1 on social media. And the latest episode of F1 Explains is all about the role of press officers with former McLaren Communications Director Sophie Ogg. That's just below this show on the F1 Nation feed. Well, guys, thank you both very much. Hinch, I think you're busy at an oval race this coming weekend. Amazing. Indy 500. Are you excited?
Oh, can't wait. Christmas in May for us on the IndyCar side. Very excited, very proud to be, able to call the race, because it's one of the coolest ones that happens on the planet every year. But bummed that I won't be able to be in Montreal with you guys.
Well, Hinch, here's a thought. McLaren could do the double on Sunday. I mean, realistically, right? They could win the Indy 500 and then 2 hours later win the Canadian Grand Prix, right?
They certainly could. I don't know if Zach's planning on being at both, but I'll try to hop on the jet and rip over to Montreal to say hi if he does.
JP, you're in Montreal with us, aren't you?
I sure am. Looking forward to it. Big weekend. You're packing the
well,
rain
guys,
jacket, though, TC. We haven't even spoken about the weather.
Yeah, well, rain on Saturday and Sunday. Let's hope it's not as bad as 2011.
Yeah.
Got very wet feet back then. Well, guys at home, thank you very much for listening. We will, of course, be back on Monday to discuss all the big talking points from Montreal. So we'll speak to you then. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.